At 42, Elena Harper hadn't planned to rewrite her life story, but fate, as she often mused bitterly to herself, had a knack for tearing up even the most carefully drafted blueprints. 2 years after her husband's untimely death, she stood at the edge of a sagging picket fence, gazing at a modest 2-story house nestled in a drowsy suburban enclave. The place wasn't much to look at: peeling paint, a creaky porch swing, ivy clawing up one wall, but it had a sprawling backyard with a pool, a promise she'd made to her 15-year-old daughter, Sophie, when they'd left the city's suffocating memories behind. Elena needed this quiet corner of the world to be their sanctuary, a place to mend the fractures grief had carved into their lives. Sophie, once vibrant but now retreating into silence, deserved a chance to breathe again, and Elena was determined to give it to her. The house wasn't grand, but it had a stubborn charm, and for the first few weeks, it delivered on its promise. Sophie, initially skeptical about the move, found solace in the pool, spending lazy afternoons floating under the sun or giggling with new friends from school. Elena, watching her daughter's spark flicker back to life, threw herself into small projects: tending the overgrown garden, fixing loose shutters, crafting a rhythm for their days. The neighbors seemed pleasant enough: older couples, young families, retirees obsessed with their pristine lawns. They waved politely, kept their distance, and Elena was content with that. She hadn't come to make friends. She'd come to rebuild. But trouble, as it often does, arrived in the form of Deborah Klein, a woman impossible to ignore. Broad-shouldered, with a voice that boomed across yards and a scowl that could curdle milk, Deborah lived 3 houses down in a garish home painted a shade too bold, wind chimes clanging like a warning. Elena first noticed her one evening, sipping coffee on the porch while Sophie and her friends splashed in the pool. Deborah's eyes, sharp and judgmental, lingered on the scene, her lips pursed as if the sound of teenage laughter was a personal affront. Elena had seen her type before: petty tyrants who ruled small domains with an iron grip. At the grocery store, Deborah was the woman barking at cashiers, demanding managers over a bruised apple. Elena brushed it off, hoping to avoid her orbit. That hope crumbled quickly. Deborah's first approach was deceptively cordial, her voice dripping with false warmth as she leaned over the fence, commenting on the lively pool scene before pivoting to lecture Elena about community standards and noise after 6 p.m. Elena, not wanting trouble, nodded politely, though she knew no such rule existed in the homeowner's agreement she'd studied before buying. She assumed Deborah's nosiness would fade, but the visits grew frequent, each one laced with sharper critiques. The trash bins were too visibile, the garden needed weeding, community events weren't optional. It became clear Deborah wasn't just a neighbor, she was a self-proclaimed enforcer, her friendliness a flimsy mask for control. Elena kept her distance, refusing to be baited into neighborhood drama. Sophie thrived, blissfully unaware of Deborah's looming presence, and Elena wanted to keep it that way. But one sweltering Saturday, the fragile peace shattered. Sophie had 2 friends over, their music barely audible beyond the fence, when a commotion erupted. Elena, folding laundry inside, froze at the sound of shouting, not playful teenage noise, but something venomous. She dropped the basket and bolted outside, her heart lurching at the sight. Deborah, inside their yard, her meaty hand clamped around Sophie's arm, her face a mask of fury as she berated the girls about unauthorized gatherings and endangering themselves. Time slowed. Sophie's eyes, wide with fear, locked onto her mother's. Elena's shock gave way to a primal rage, but she held it in check, her voice slicing through the humid air like a blade. "Let go of my daughter! Now!" Deborah released Sophie, stepping back with a huff, her cheeks flaming as she ranted about rules and disrespect. Sophie rubbed her arm, red marks blooming where Deborah's fingers had dug in. Elena's calm was a thin veneer over a storm. She ordered Deborah to leave, and when the woman refused, still shouting, Elena pulled out her phone, dialing the non-emergency police line. The threat was enough. Deborah stormed off, muttering curses about entitled newcomers. Elena pulled Sophie into a fierce hug, feeling her tremble. She sent the girls inside, locked the door, and stood alone in the yard, her pulse thundering. This wasn't just a bad neighbor. This was a line crossed, a violation that demanded action. That night, Elena became a woman possessed. She photographed the marks on Sophie's arm, typed a detailed account of the incident, and scheduled a doctor's visit to document the injury. She called an old colleague, now a conflict resolution expert, for advice. She sat Sophie down, explaining that none of this was her fault and promising they wouldn't be bullied out of their new life. As the sun set, the pool's dark surface mirrored Elena's resolve. Deborah had made a grave mistake. The days that followed crackled with tension. A typed note appeared taped to Elena's door, warning of unapproved gatherings, in block letters. She preserved it in a Ziploc bag, adding it to her growing file. Strange vehicles lingered near the house: a pickup truck with a man who watched too long, a white van with no clear purpose. Fake violation notices, claiming the pool was unpermitted despite being grandfathered in, slipped under her door. Trash bins were appended, graffiti scrawled on her fence. Follow the rules or leave. Elena documented it all: photos, voice memos, police reports, her calm a weapon against chaos. The harassment escalated. A man in a compliance jacket showed up after dark, demanding to inspect the property with a badge flashed too quickly to read. Elena's questions about his credentials sent him retreating, but the encounter left her sleepless, her mind racing. She upgraded her security hidden cameras, reinforced locks, and enrolled Sophie in self-defense classes, framing it as a fun hobby. When Deborah led a group of neighbors in a protest outside Elena's home, waving signs about community standards, Elena faced them down, her voice steady. "You're trespassing and harassing a minor. Leave, or I call the police." The crowd dispersed, but the message was clear: this was war. Elena's break came unexpectedly. An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Clara, revealed Deborah's history of driving out residents with similar tactics. A young couple had fled 2 years prior under relentless pressure. With Clara's consent, Elena recorded her account, bolstering her case. She filed harassment complaints against Deborah and her allies, her evidence a fortress, photos, footage, police reports, witness statements. Then came the night that changed everything. A shadowy figure tampered with Elena's gate, caught on camera. Police arrested Deborah's nephew, who confessed she'd sent him to teach the newcomers a lesson. The neighborhood's illusion of peace cracked wide open. Deborah's final gambit was her undoing. Late one evening, Elena smelled smoke. Racing to her backyard, she found a smoldering pile of leaves against her fence. An arson attempt, thwarted only by damp wood. Her cameras caught Deborah's unmistakable silhouette lurking nearby. The police pounced, and Elena's lawyer secured an emergency protective order. In court, Elena laid out her case with surgical precision, her evidence overwhelming. Deborah's denials crumbled. The judge granted the order, barring her from contact with Elena or Sophie and referring her for criminal charges. The aftermath was quiet but profound. Neighbors who'd once rallied behind Deborah now shunned her, their whispers turning to shame. Rumors swirled that she planned to move, her influence shattered. Elena and Sophie reclaimed their home, planting a garden, repainting the porch, laughing as they splashed paint on each other. At a community gathering, their presence unbowed, unapologetic, spoke volumes. As fireflies danced in the dusk, Elena watched Sophie play, her heart swelling with pride. They'd faced a storm and emerged stronger, their home a testament to resilience. Deborah's biggest mistake wasn't crossing Elena, it was thinking a woman who'd lost everything would break. Elena Harper didn't break. She fought, and she won.